Alrighty folks, so Tuesday is now behind us and the momentum, as you can see, it just wasn't there. A good portion of the market closing out red for the day, but you did have some standout performers such as Palantir coming in there with a 7.8% gain on the day. And then you also had United Health recovering back some ground at 4.16%. And yeah, just after the full market open, we had the ISM service data get released and it came out with a surprise at 50.1, so well below forecast. So I'm sure that played its role in the market continuing to drive down after the full open. And jumping on to oil then, as you can see here, oil yesterday didn't really get any push up to 66.46 that we had as really our line to clear if we wanted upside to head back towards the Q4. And yeah, instead we just drove down to our downside target at 65.20. We did mention yesterday there that a drive down into 65.20 possibly wick into Q3. Now we were able to just hug that line at 65.20 just for the rest of the day, but for today, really, folks, it's still going to be the Q3 down into the old range that we broke out of. Locally, if we want to try and make a move to the top side, we don't go anywhere unless we take 65.51. So it'll be interesting to see if that plays out, but overall, I do believe we very well could be seeing this old range that we broke out from so long ago. And then for gold, so yesterday I did mention that 33.50 was the line in the sand. And yeah, price went straight to it after a failure of the daily and weekly. So drove down from there, got to 33.50 and held, and we were able to rally back up for a small gain on the day. And really for today, for the day ahead, it's going to be 33.73 locally. Now we could drive in and have a test of the weekly open, but ideally 33.73, keep structure intact, and then we can start making push-ups for really what's going to be 3,400 on the price of gold there, just above the R1. So it'll be interesting to see if that plays out. But really, if we do lose 33.73, which is the daily pivot, you don't want anything same way as we had yesterday for the 33.50 level. We don't want anything closing really below 33.56, and that will at least keep in a higher low from that low. But yeah, we'll see how it all plays out. If we are risk off, then I would say topside targets are all good. And sector wise, yesterday we had utilities coming in as the worst performance with a negative, just over a negative 1% loss on the day. And then you had materials there coming in with a 0.71% gain on the day. But like I said, generally everything there was finishing up red for the day, but you had some positives there for consumer discretionary and energy as well at 0.13%. So not really much at all. And then in the Mag 7, you had Amazon, which was the only positive gain for the day. Everything else was finishing in quite red. So be interesting to see. There's definitely some buying opportunities coming up here very soon for quite a few of the tickers, but we'll see how the news headlines really play out from here. If we take a look then at the S&P 500, so yesterday we did have that push up overnight. We managed to gain the monthly pivot pretty much from the get-go. However, we were unable to hold August. So once we got into the full market open, we had that sell-off. We had the well below forecast ISM service data come out, and yeah, market just drove straight down into 63.03. So that was the level we said to watch out for, and for pretty much the rest of the day, that's the level we danced on. So early signs for the overnight futures market, we have lost the weekly pivot, so we need to be careful here. Really, overnight, we need to regain that and then push for what's 63.12 for the day. If we can regain this little block of pivots, then yeah, we have a good opportunity then to try and push for the structure break at 63.35. But if we are obviously risk off and we are going to continue to bleed, then the rejection of the weekly pivot overnight is really going to lead us to 62.74 and 62.51. And for the Nasdaq, as we can see, again, quite a cluster of pivots and levels here. So generally, if you're seeing a cluster, if price is reacting from it, so if it's feeling this cluster, we're most likely going to have a sustained drive down. And if we're bullishly gaining the cluster, then you're having a sustained move to the upside. So we'll see how this plays out. But so far, it's really not looking good here. We're trading well below on the local structure here for what's the weekly, the monthly, and the daily at this point. But yesterday had the same kind of story as the S&P 500 as it tends to have here. You know, we got up into the full market open and sold off down into the daily pivot where we danced for the rest of the day before eventually just losing it there as the market closed up going into the new day. But as I said, if we're bearishly testing these levels, then we're looking to the downside, and that's going to be 22,800, kind of down into that area. And if we manage to regain, then we're looking for August. It's as easy as that. And then finally, for the Dow Jones, we are kind of squeezed between our levels. You know, we have the weekly pivot to below for support, and we have the monthly pivot above for resistance. So ideally, overnight, if we're able to hold the daily, then it's going to be looking for a retest or at least a failure of the monthly pivot at 44,351. If we continue to sell off across the board, then yeah, I would say the weekly pivot doesn't hold, and we're at least going to 43,950, if not to the March open. So you do have some positives there with the likes of United Health helping sustain the Dow Jones. You know, you can see here for once, instead of the Dow Jones looking the worst for wear, you actually have a little bit of bullish structural holds. So with the Dow Jones, the United Health getting a 4% gain on the day would have certainly helped prop that up. So if it's going to have a run, I would say the Dow Jones would be a good hedge, as I wouldn't expect it to bleed as much as the rest of the market. But yeah, that's pretty much it, folks. Any questions, feel free to give me a shout, and have a good one.